Scott Bostrom,
Here.
Wendy Mueller,
Here.
Juliet Marola, Jeffrey Masters, Perry Hoff,
Here.
Lawrence Gottfredson,
Here.
Ara Abrahamian,
Here.
and TJ Thornberry.
Here. All right, if you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. No announcements other than the next meeting on the 26th, tentatively, as usual. I don't see anybody from the public. So with that, or do we have minutes available? Okay, so we'll have to skip over the minutes. And do we have any false alarm appeals? No false alarm appeals. So it looks like we're going right into the budget presentation.
Good morning, Kristen Simeone, Finance Director. As every year, we try to bring the building board our budget and get your approval on the budget as well as the reserves.
Is this screen not available in the middle? I mean, I can see these two, but it's a little bit of an angle.
Just use one line.
Yeah.
Is it on? There you go.
If not, we can just make do with the side ones here. If there's a quick fix. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to start with the pro forma, and we have our total estimated revenues proposed for fiscal year 24. That's with no change in any rates. And again, based on the building official's estimates of what she thinks revenues would be. And then operating expenditures, you can see, are staying about the same. They go up approximately 3% over the years. So we're starting, and then you have capital outlay, and we'll go over the fiscal year 24 outlay. And then you have your beginning and ending reserves, and you can see through fiscal year 28. So we are starting with a $3.1 million operating reserve, ending at the end of the year about the same, but through the pro forma through fiscal year 28, they're about almost 2 million at that point in time.
Why revenues going down?
Because the operating expenditures are going up more than the revenues. So right now we're in we have a lot of people taking on, we have more permits coming in due to the hurricane. So she expects that in fiscal year 26 we would start dropping down to more normal levels for the permits. So in fiscal year 24, we are balanced with no change in funds. In fiscal year 24, the division did ask for an added position, another permit technician. You can see the annual cost is about $65,000 with a one-time cost of $3,000 for the computer equipment that would be needed. And again, this is due to high volume of building permits requiring additional support of staff for permitting intake and issuance, record requests, filing, scanning, inspection, scheduling, and general phone inquiries. Also in fiscal year 24, the division has asked for temporary employees, and that's 1.5 employees there, so 1 full-time, 1 part-time. Again, they're working on scanning and filing projects of a lot of records that are paper copies so that they'll be more available. So for 1 year, that's about $75,000. In the pro forma, we do have personnel estimates at about 4% merit increase. Council did approve an additional 2% for general employees starting October 1. Again, trying to attract employees in this market. You've got the defined benefit pension plan is flat based on the citywide total. The defined contribution estimate is 10% on pensionable wages. The city is working on reopening the defined benefit plan for general employees, but the funds that are scheduled for the defined contribution plan would just move over to that defined benefit plan. Health insurance increase is about 10%, and workers' comp 10%. And again, it's important to note on health insurance, it actually came in higher than that. However, our risk manager was able to work with the company and get it down to 10%. Operating estimates for fiscal year 24 are per departmental request. Computer overhead is seeing approximately an 80% increase. Administration charges were estimated at 3%. That we'll be finalizing all of those based on everyone's budget. Property insurance increases. We have been seeing record increases in property insurance, so it's estimated at 100%. Other general liability insurances are scheduled at 5 to 10%. Fiscal year 25 through 28, we just usually use a 3% increase overall, except for general liability insurance at 5%. So going into the equipment that was needed in fiscal year 24, the division has asked for a new plotter scanner. That's about $15,000. And then the rest of it is for an automated voice response system for inspection scheduling. Again, they're really trying to do some more automation to help with the needs of the division. In fiscal year 25 and 27, it's for replacement vehicles. And as usual, the division will monitor and adjust staffing if activity warrants and revenues and reserves allow. So again, if we for some reason saw a large downturn, we would start looking at staffing and saying, oh, do we still need all these permit techs? Might reduce it. Again, we try to usually do that through attrition or transferring to another division if something like that were to happen. We try to maintain the operating reserves, again, for future stabilization. And again, we come to you as the building board for recommendation to maintain those excess operating reserves. And this is kind of the reason, so we wanted to show you, so back in fiscal year 26 at the height, and then what occurred during the recession area or time frame when we had a lot of slowdown in activity. So you can see the positions at that time were about 13 positions in 2006. At the very lowest, we were down to 5 employees, and they were taking furloughs. And then now as activity has been going up, we've been adding employees back, especially right now with the increase of permits due to the hurricane. So again, we think it is important to keep those reserves so we can again keep steady costs for the customers, as well as if a downturn comes, we still have to maintain some operating expenses as well as some employees to be able to service the permits coming in. So that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Well, in the year 2024, you've got capital outlay at $40,000.
Yes.
What is that actually?
So that is $15,000 for the plotter scanner,
Right.
and the remaining is for the automated voice response system.
Oh, okay. The other question I have is, what is a comfortable operating reserve for you? What do you feel is comfortable?
So, and it depends by fund. So for the building board, again, we know what happened in the past. You can see we had a high level of reserves. Our reserves went down to a much lower number, but in 2012 was our lowest. Our recommendation overall, like as a guide, is 16.7%. That's 2 months of operating. But again, for the building board, again, trying to maintain if for some reason there is a change in the economy or, the building that we're seeing, we suggest a little higher. So again, we're not uncomfortable with the reserves that are there.
What about 2028? I mean,
sorry.
You've dropped quite a bit and nothing's going down. So is it important that we raise the revenues?
So I wouldn't recommend it at this time because we do review this every year and we will look at that. So again, if we thought activity is dropping, we might be able to drop an employee, you know, as a like a permit technician. And I don't mean drop them that way.
That's expenses, but what about revenues?
So for revenues, again, we would look at that more as we were getting closer to that area. So we're very conservative in our numbers. So like, especially in the short term, we would, you know, generally we usually have a little bit more revenues at the end of the year and we have usually a little less expenses. So we're kind of comfortable leaving a little cushion. But again, we would monitor this every year and come back at some point if we thought we needed to raise rates.
Our department operates as an enterprise
Correct.
fund, right? Okay,
Yes.
so basically primarily funded by permit revenue.
It is, yes.
Can you remind us what the law says in regards to reserves in terms of, is it a maximum of 2 years of?
I don't think
Of
it's a
revenue?
maximum, but anything that is over the estimated revenues for that year needs to be approved by the board. So they would be thinking like, oh, you just keep 1 year's worth of permit revenue in reserves. But again, we saw in the past that wouldn't have worked well.
Because I know in other municipalities where the board was the recommendation made by the board that could go beyond if it was justified in terms of, I think the general understanding or the general mindset is that good people are hard to find, not only in the private sector, but the government sector as well.
Yep.
If we were to have a downturn, we would want to be able to ride something out at least for a couple years is what I would recommend.
Right.
So in my opinion is, as long as we're not stretching the legal aspect of the reserves, I think we need at least 2 years worth of operating. If permits were to stop today, that we'd be able to at least maintain for 2 years in hopes that within the 2-year period that things
Would recover.
improve.
Yep.
Because we all know, you lose somebody, a good inspector, a good plans examiner, whatever it might be, that's going to be really hard to replace down the road.
Correct.
So that, I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from a reserve standpoint, as long as we're operating within the legalities of what we can
Correct.
put in. I know there's some parameters around that and some
I don't think-
exceptions. I just want to make sure that,
As far as I'm aware, it's just if it's anything over that 1 year's worth of permit revenue.
as long as it's approved by a board.
By the
or-
board, yes.
I agree with you in that all I'm seeing as a business, all I'm seeing is you're staying stagnant and it's costing more. I wouldn't want to lose those employees either, and I don't like the fact that the reserves are getting closer to what you will not be able to afford because your expenses are higher than your reserve.
Right.
So I almost believe that fees need to increase, even in this next year. I don't like that because I've had to pay them.
Yes,
But-
and again, because we budget conservatively and we probably might have more revenue and little less expense, because again, the divisions really try hard to stay within their budgets and even come in under budget, but we don't want to tie their hands when things are needed. So I'm not as concerned about that this year, but again, we would continue to monitor that and bring that back.
Do you have 20 and 22 and 2023 numbers that we could look back and see where we're at, that we can kind of see where we're at?
Yes.
Now?
Let's see, I don't have it with me, but 23 is actually going to come in higher than the 1.9, you know, because again, everyone was coming in for their Hurricane Ian permits, and we're still seeing people come in, but it might be slowing down. But our beginning reserves, I can go out to the website and show you the original budget.
Yeah, I mean,
Would that be okay?
As you mentioned, we want to look at where we're at and you
Yeah.
plan for a couple of years and then maybe make a change, but it'd be good to see where we were a couple of years ago. That way we can
Yep.
see maybe what the trend has been,
Yep.
which will better let us look forward.
and I'm sorry I don't have that with me, but I can at least show you what we budgeted last year, and you can see that the reserves are actually more than we had budgeted for what we thought was going to happen for fiscal year '22. So let me go out to the website.
Do you mind, before we jump off of this,
sure.
can I, there was a slide there where you had a property insurance at 100%
Yes.
increase? And I guess in my mind's eye, I'm thinking what property insurance, or excuse me, property insurance would be
So it's like
allocated to
for
the
all the
building?
buildings that the city owns. So we have quite a few buildings that we own. So, and then we spread it between the various departments that are
Okay.
using those properties.
So that there's not a distinction between a capital fund versus strictly building board or
Correct.
building department?
Right, no,
So that's their share of, okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay. I mean, you could
We can
recommend
make
changes if you want. I mean, we're here to hear what you have to say and bring it forward to council. But we didn't have the meeting last month, so we did have to bring it to council just so they would have it for the September, in advance of the September meeting. But we would provide your comments to them as well. So, let me go out to the website. Sorry about that.
Should we cue the elevator music?
I know, I'm sorry.
Just kidding.
Oh, I never get this far.
Okay, so here we go. Can you see that? Let me make it, see if I can make it a little bigger. Scroll down. Oh, jeez. So sensitive. Okay, so this was our adopted budget for fiscal year '23. And, oh, that must not be the right fund, hold on. That's Marina, still too far. It went down quite a few pages. Okay, here's the building fund. So you can see that for fiscal year '23 budget, we thought we were gonna end up the year at almost $6 million. And in our new, based on what we came in fiscal year '22 and what we project for fiscal year '23, in the PowerPoint I showed you, we were a little over $3 million. So again, that's the increased revenue we're currently seeing. We do have some expenditures, but we do have also some vacancies still in that department for inspectors that we're trying to fill. We're currently using CAP Government, who will supply inspectors that have licenses that might be missing in our building area right now.
So in the current budget proposal, you're proposing 1 year, basically a 1 year reserve. Is that?
It's actually almost, it's a little more than that, but yes. But
Okay.
as far as revenues, the revenues are, it's well over the revenues. It's almost like a year and a half of revenues.
Year and a half, okay. Because I know, can you show us, or do you know how much is going in, like what I call the burn rate, to where you reach your maximum on the revenue monthly?
I don't
Any
have
idea?
that, no, I think, but like this year, we're gonna be a little over $2 million, just in permit revenues.
Okay, I mean, it's close to 2 years, that's where I'm trying to get to, is where.
Yeah.
is
Right.
almost-
It's close, and like I said, we're very conservative, so that's why I don't recommend necessarily increasing rates yet, because if we had done that last year, you know, we would've been taking even more in, and it's not necessarily needed at this time, but we will continue to monitor it, and that's why we come every year, and we look at this every year, and we'll look at any trends that might be changing.
Do you think by the end of the year or the first quarter, not, your year ends in March or December?
So our fiscal year end is through September 30th.
September?
Yep.
Okay. So by the beginning of this coming year or December, do you think or really not December, by March,
By March.
do you think you'll have a much better idea about where you stand?
Yes.
Because you'll be through most of the hurricane permitting and
Yes.
really back to normal permitting.
Right.
So, as silly as this sounds, because you can't predict the future, but you have to, I don't.
Right.
What about annexation?
So again, the city is really trying to enhance their annexation program. Council has made it a priority. Sometimes it's a small group or a business that might come in. Other times, like we had mobile home parks that have come in. So again, they are still looking at those opportunities, and then that also increases because now those, any properties that are annexed in would have to follow our building code for any type of changes they need to make in their properties.
That'd weigh a lot on what you have to predict then.
Yes, and that's why we're constantly looking at this throughout the year. We update our performas, so usually January timeframe, because we're trying to trying to get council's input on what they want to see in the upcoming budget, so we'll update then. Again, by March, we have finished our audit, so we'll update for that. And then again, as we're doing budget, depending what this division is asking for, or what we're seeing, we ask for more input as well. But I mean, you can see we're doing much better this year than we thought we would be at this time. So that's why I'm not so concerned at this time. But again, we monitor this very closely.
I just don't want to lose any good employees.
Yes.
I'm with TJ.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments?
So we
With
would
that,
just ask for your recommendation to maybe approve the budget as it was presented, as well as the reserves that are shown for that pro
So
forma.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget as presented, including the reserves as presented.
Second.
We have to
Well, I was
move.
calling for a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
Make a
you
motion?
made the motion.
I was
But you can't.
requesting a motion.
I'm sorry.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and your
Absolutely,
input.
thank you.
I would just say
Thank you.
going, for next year, I would like to see maybe this year and last year, at least that way we
Yes.
can compare when you send out the charts.
Okay, we'll make sure to include that. We'll do it like this one, where we have 2 years actuals are projected, and then the
All on the
proposed.
same page, that we kind of follow across it.
Yes, I'll make sure to bring that with us next year.
Do we know when the minutes might be available from the last meeting? Is any kind of, I mean, is it soon, or?
Our recording secretary has left, so I would have to go back and look. I know she had worked on them, she'd started them. I'm not sure where she had left them.
Oh, okay.
So they'll be ready by the next meeting for sure.
Next meeting, okay. There were several board members that weren't able to make the last meeting, and one of the questions that came up, we had a nice presentation from our building official, Kathy, and I posed the question, you know, unlike in the past, we were meeting monthly and there was always cases to be heard. what's changed. And I was pleased on her answer is that she's seems to be making a strong effort to resolve cases before they get to this point, which obviously is in everybody's best interest, I think, as citizens of Punta Gorda as well as this board. So just a little bit of information there, because I was kind of wondering why we've missed so many meetings as, you know, as contractors and homeowners. Are we all getting along these days better than in the past? But obviously that was a difference, that you know, change that she's made, which I think is a very positive thing. So, any other questions, comments, business? All right, hearing none, we're adjourned. Different from last meeting. Thank you, guys.